Part 32. A Sledgehammer Breaks into Pirates. Author, Zippo. Chapter 311. Evidence, damn it, we pirates actually need evidence to do what we do. What's going on in this world? Is there any royal law? Are there any laws? Orgrim cursed a little irritably. Then he turned to look at Plank and asked Plank, give your intelligence department some time. Can you involve the Navy or the world government in it, find out the evidence? Ganglank was stunned for a moment. Mr. Hammer, you are not being kind. If this was really done by the Navy or the world government, what evidence do you think they would leave behind for us to find? I'm afraid you are trying to embarrass me. Plank. But Plank couldn't say these words to Orgrim, so he could only nod with difficulty and said, I will try to find these evidences as quickly as possible. Orgrim just said it casually, not really forcing Gangplank to do anything. Therefore, after hearing Plank's words, he shook his head helplessly and said, forget it, this matter is indeed a bit difficult for you. Is there no other way besides this method? Rengar thought for a while and asked. Beckman smiled and said, it's not that there is no other way. The simplest and most direct way is to confront the enemy head-on. Assume that the world government and the Navy are, if they participate, then they must have joined forces with Moria, which is logical. How could Moria have the courage to go against me? But if there was a world government and a Navy, he would dare to do so. From this point of view, there might be elite forces from the Navy headquarters waiting for us in the Devil's Triangle. Orgrim had a toothache after hearing this. Isn't this the same trick that the Warring States period would use to deal with Whitebeard in the future? It's just that this time he was a bit more cunning. It seemed like a conspiracy, but in fact it was an upright conspiracy, and he changed the location. Let's make it clear, I know that you, the Warhammer pirates, have guessed many of the causes and effects behind it, but you have no evidence, so what can you do? Otherwise, why don't you save Enelu? If you want to be saved, come and have a head-to-head try with our naval headquarters. Head on, can you pass it without touching it? This is the worry in everyone's heart. Don't look at Orgrim's bullying of the Navy before, but if you really want to look at hard power, the Navy is the well-deserved maritime overlord. Although the Warhammer pirates are not weak, they want to be head-on. I just went to the Navy headquarters, which is still a little bit worse. Is there no other way? Orgrim frowned and asked. Do you really want to give up Enel? Not nothing, Beckman smiled and said again. Orgrim glared at Beckman angrily. If you have a way, just say it. If you go round and round, it will appear that you have a high IQ or something. Any solution? Orgrim asked. Still on the point of evidence, as long as the Navy appears in the Devil's Triangle, isn't this evidence? Beckman spread his hands and said very naturally. When everyone heard this, they were all stunned. But soon, Neiman asked, second brother, it is impossible for the Navy to show up before it discovers our main force, right? I think they will show up at the moment when we fight Mariah. By then, we have already stepped into a trap. Even if there is evidence, so what? It's no use, in the end I have to fight head-on. Orgrim and others also nodded. It was obvious that they thought so too. The people at the Navy headquarters are not fools. If they go to mess with Moria, they will definitely not show up. And once the main force passes by now, there will be no need for any evidence at that time, and we will go directly to the front-facing part. So doesn't Beckman's words mean that he didn't say anything? But looking at everyone's confused expressions, Beckman smiled again and said no, if. Before he finished speaking, he heard Stussy behind Orgrim suddenly speak. No, you don't need the entire main force, only Mr. Zui is enough. Once Lord Hammer enters the trap, the Navy will definitely take action immediately. After all, the Warhammer pirates also revolve around Lord Hammer. Once Lord Hammer is captured by the Navy does not even need to take action. Warhammer the pirate group is likely to be torn apart by the other big pirates, just like the Golden Lion fleet, and the Navy can also take advantage of the situation to counterattack the New World, Stussy said in a deep voice. As soon as she finished speaking, Beckman glanced at Stussy in surprise, because what he wanted to say was almost the same as Stussy's. But these words, spoken by Stussy, seemed very strange. Beckman couldn't help but wonder if there was some conspiracy between the Navy and the world government that he didn't see. Is Stussy leading them into a trap? Orgrim was also a little surprised. He turned to look at Stussy with a strange expression. Are you pushing me into a pit of fire? It means that as long as I go to the Devil's Triangle and have a battle with the Navy, many things will be solved and the situation will be solved. What about me? Should I challenge the Navy headquarters alone? Do you think too highly of me? Are you really just a kid? The sister-in-law is right, this is the key to breaking the situation, but if it is really Orgrim who goes there in person, even if we seize the evidence, it will not mean much, because the Navy's strategic intention has been achieved. As long as they capture or kill Orgrim, the rest can be sacrificed, and I think the 5 old stars will also be happy to do so, Beckman said softly. Yes, if Orgrim falls into the trap, the rest of the people will not care. Even if they seize evidence and massacre several alliance countries, this is within the acceptable range. Even the Navy make a lot of money with the world government, maybe you will laugh out loud. The original price you paid for this was just to kill an Enel, but now it comes with an Orgrim. Isn't this happy enough? So what you're saying is, find someone to pretend to be me, Orgrim touched his chin and said. Then everyone's expressions became a little weird. Who is the most suitable person to pretend to be Orgrim? It must be Dai-Pen. She is so miserable, fighting desperately on the front line with Big Mom when the pirates start a war. We arrange for her to challenge the Navy headquarters here? Beckman nodded first and said, yes, and Dai-Pen is the most suitable person to do this, but the problem is, we have already used this trick once in Impelton. With the IQ of the Warring States General of the Navy, it is impossible to stumble here again. So the difficulty is how to make the Navy believe that it is the real you who went to the Devil. Triangular Sea area. Orgrim. The difficulty should not be how to convince Dai-Pen to die on my behalf. From what you say, you just don't consider Dai-Pen's wishes. The others also looked at Baker with strange eyes. Man, I thought you were so polite on weekdays, but I didn't expect you to have such a dark heart. Did Dai-Pen owe you money? Are you cheating her like this? At this time, Beckman also noticed that something was wrong with everyone's eyes, and was stunned at first. After a moment, his expression suddenly became clear, and then he said, I misunderstood, I didn't mean to ask Dai-Pen to die. In fact, after seizing the evidence, Dai-Pen can surrender directly, and once we do this, if Bien's actions go smoothly, he can completely threaten the world government and Navy and let them release Dai-Pen and Enelu together. After hearing this explanation, everyone nodded in understanding. Ah, you can surrender, then you don't have to die, and it will be fine. Although it sounds a bit embarrassing, it is also done according to the plan. As for the risks, it is true. There are still risks, but what can you do without risks? If you only consider the risks, then everyone should not save Enelu. Isn't this the safest option? How can I make people at the Navy headquarters regard Dai-Pen as the real me? Orgrim asked in a deep voice. Orgrim was still very excited about this plan. Dai-Pen went to challenge the Navy headquarters. Once the Navy showed up, the evidence would be exposed, and the initiative would be in his hands. The Warhammer pirates are in their hands. There is no need to feel as uncomfortable as now. And if the Navy had not appeared, with Dai-Pen's strength, it would still be no problem to hit Moria, and there is a high possibility of rescuing Enel. As for the what if Enelu is not in Mariah's hands, there is no such thing as a perfect plan, and there is nothing Orgrim can do about it. I can only think that your life is miserable, Enelu. As long as Daipen seizes the evidence and Orgrim directly leads people to cause trouble, or even attacks Mary Joa, there is a high possibility that the world government will compromise. As for the end, is it possible that the situation will develop into a situation where everything is dead and the net is dead again? Even a Daipen was compensated? Of course, there are still some. As long as the world government is strong enough and withstands all the pressure, they really kill Daipen and Enel, and Orgrim has nothing to do. The most is revenge. After all, as the saying goes, there is no perfect plan. This plan is already very good, and the success rate is not low. After listening to Orgrim's inquiry, Beckman, who had been very confident and calm just now, shook his head with a helpless expression and said, "The reason why I regard this as a difficulty is because I have not figured out a way. Let the Navy headquarters believe that Daipen is Orgrim. This is indeed very difficult to operate. After all, Sengoku and the others are not fools." At this moment, the phone bug in Plank's arm suddenly rang. After picking up the phone, Plank said a few words and his expression became very ugly. Orgrim's eyes darkened and he asked what happened. "Mr. Hammer, our spies in Totland have sent news that the Big Mom pirates seem to be summoning cotters and ministers from various islands. It is very likely that the war will escalate," Plank said in a deep voice. There was a ferocious look in Orgrim's eyes, and he cursed, "This damn old woman really has her." There is no doubt that Charlotte Lingling may have realized something through some channels, and felt that this is probably a good opportunity to deal with Orgrim and others. Beckman's eyes lit up and he said, "Before, I was still thinking about how to make it more reasonable for you to go to the Devil's Triangle alone to challenge the sea, but now, the reason has come. The main force must be on guard against Big Mom. The pirate group's big move is a suitable excuse. But we have no room for the main force at all. According to this plan, we have to divide our troops into two groups." Orgrim said. "This is just an excuse to hide it from the Navy and the world government for a while. As for the Big Mom pirates, just find a way to delay them. When we solve the matter, Charlotte Lingling will find that there is no chance, so she will naturally quiet," Beckman said quickly. "How to delay?" Orgrim frowned and said. "Ha ha 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 ha, don't we have good friends? It all depends on whether your relationship with Kaido is strong or not." Beckman laughed. Rengar said in surprise, "Second Master, we are not a true alliance with Kaido. How can he be willing to go to war with Charlotte Lingling over this? It's true that we are not an alliance in the true sense, but I didn't say I wanted them to go to war. As long as Kaido makes a gesture and scares the Big Mom pirates, wouldn't it be enough? Charlotte Lingling will definitely not take this risk," Beckman said with a smile. "Is his relationship with Kaido strong?" Orgrim thinks it's just that, but from Kaido's perspective, he is his good brother. As long as he opens his mouth, it is not particularly troublesome, it is just a gesture, and Kaido will definitely not refuse. The only regret is that Orgrim will owe Kaido again, and he will still have to pay it back in the future. So we are still back to the starting point. How can we make the Navy believe that Daipen is me?" Orgrim smacked his lips and said. Beckman and the others all fell silent. This issue was the biggest difficulty. Orgrim looked at the silence of everyone, and finally shook his head helplessly and said, "Let's just come here today. Although that bastard Moria has declared war on us, it doesn't matter whether it's a few days earlier or a few days later. Let's go back and think about it first. If you have any good ideas, we can communicate with you later. It's obviously impossible to finalize the plan in one go. It's late at night. Let everyone go back and think about it first and have a good rest." A Sledgehammer Breaks into Pirates. Author, Zippo. Chapter 312. Nothing was discussed at this meeting. It all stayed on an immature paper plan, and there was an unavoidable difficulty. Even Orgrim had a few doubts in his mind. In short, although the general direction was in place, The plan was still full of loopholes and needed to be enriched. But before it can be enriched, the difficulties must be solved first, otherwise it will be of no use and it will be a waste of effort. Back in the house, Orgrim sat down on the sofa, while Stussy went to pour a cup of tea for Orgrim with a wink. Orgrim smiled, took the tea, and took a sip, his eyes wandering. "What are you thinking about?" Stussy stood behind Orgrim and reached out to rub his head. He wanted to relax Orgrim's nerves and pressure. Orgrim smiled and said, "I'm thinking about Baker Man's plan just now seems to be very good, but apart from the difficulty of Dai Peng, there are also many flaws in it." "How can any plan be perfect?" Stussy comforted softly. Orgrim nodded slightly, "Yes, how can there be any perfect plan? The Navy headquarters plans to deal with Whitebeard in the future. It can be said that the preparations are very complete, but in the end, it is still both sides suffered losses, and even Impelton was washed away. You said, I haven't provoked the Navy or the world government recently. Didn't I just meet Kaido and play war games with Charlotte Lingling? Why did they suddenly change their normal behavior and come to deal with me? Do you think I'm easy to bully?" Orgrim asked softly. Stussy was silent for a moment, and then said, "Master Hammer, you are a pirate after all. Do you need any reason for the Navy to deal with you? It's just that there happened to be an opportunity, so they took it." Orgrim shook his head with emotion. "Yes, does the Navy need a reason to deal with me? It's just that Anilu happened to be his shortcoming, and they happened to seize the opportunity. Thinking about it carefully, although I haven't provoked the Navy recently, I still have a lot of hatred with the Navy. Thinking about this kind of problem is indeed a bit confusing." At this moment, Stussy asked softly, "Master Chui, if you really can't come up with any good plan to solve this matter, you really haven't considered it? What have you considered?" Orgrim took another sip of tea and asked. Stussy hesitated for a moment, but still gritted his teeth and said, "Give up Enelil. I know that he is very important to you, Mr. Hammer, and he is considered your disciple, but the risk here is too great. It requires the entire Warhammer Pirates to take the risk together, and as long as we give up on him, although the Warhammer Pirates will suffer losses in terms of reputation, they will not suffer any damage at all. In this world, strength still depends on strength." No one dares to say anything. Orgrim's drinking of tea stopped, and Stussy felt this change. But she still added another sentence, "and Enelu may not necessarily die. The most he can do is be imprisoned in Impelton. There will be long-term plans in the future." Orgrim was very surprised at this time. "Is this what you should say? You should be the one who encouraged me, right? After all, what Stussy said makes sense. As long as you don't care about Enel, there is no risk. No matter how the world government and the Navy arrange it, they will just sit there. But you, Stussy, are a spy for the CP agency. Could this be trying to encourage me in reverse?" "Stussy, you're not a pirate," Orgrim suddenly spoke. Before Stussy could speak, Orgrim continued, "You are right. I will bear with you this time, take a step back, give up Enelu, and let him fend for himself. For the Warhammer Pirates, is the most advantageous choice. Anyway, there is a high probability that the boy will not die. He will just go to Impelton to suffer. So what? Didn't Boss Shiji also suffer in the first place? Now take a step back and think about it in the future. What, it all makes sense." Stussy's eyes lit up and she said, "Yes, this is the best choice. Yes, it is the best choice, but it is not the choice I should make." Orgrim said in a deep voice. "I can retreat from many places. It's not like I haven't retreated before. I couldn't beat the Navy. I ran away when I asked. I ran away in embarrassment not once or twice. But that's all me. I can do anything. But in some places, obviously the best choice is to take a step back, but I just can't, because if you take a step back now, it will be difficult to come in again, Orgrim whispered softly. At this point, Orgrim's eyes flashed, and he said in a very unruly tone, "What's more, I am Khazgaro's Orgrim, and even my own subordinates. If you can't protect him, what's the difference between him and a loser like Moria? Now take a step back, how can I have the dignity to call myself a hero in the future? Now taking a step back, how can I compete with the heroes on the sea? Now take a step back, my indomitable heart, can you come back?" Stussy looked at Orgrim's back and was affected by his heroic spirit. Yes, if Orgrim really took a step back here, would he still be Orgrim? After a long silence, Stussy suddenly asked, "What about Mr. Hammer? If this plan really doesn't solve that pain point, what do you do? That shows that that bastard from the Warring States period is really powerful, and at that point, I can only have a good fight with him. Anyway, this is not the first time that I have defeated many with less. With my strength, maybe I can still." At this point, Orgrim did not continue talking. Although he is very confident, he does not have the habit of being blindly arrogant. If he really goes to the Devil's Triangle, there is really a conspiracy of the Navy behind it, and he is indeed in danger. Stussy didn't speak this time, and both of them were silent for a long time. Then, Orgrim said, "I don't think so much anymore, there will be a way to solve it. It's late at night and I haven't slept well, so I'd better rest first." After saying that, Orgrim stood up and walked towards the bedroom. Although he was not sure what was going on with Stussy, Orgrim had decided that from now on, he would block Stussy's contact with the outside world, and she could not leave his side for another step. She cannot be allowed to pass on any news. Stussy hasn't noticed the change in Orgrim's attitude yet. After all, she doesn't plan to pass the news to anyone now. She just hopes that Orgrim can take a step back. Lying on the bed, Stussy reached out and hugged Orgrim, pressed her long white legs on Orgrim's body, and rested her head on Orgrim's chest. She could clearly hear the powerful heartbeat coming from Orgrim's body. Feeling the warmth coming from Orgrim's body made Stussy feel a little intoxicated. I raised my eyes slightly and looked at Orgrim, and found that he had obviously closed his eyes and wanted to fall asleep, but his brows were slightly wrinkled, as if he was worried. For some reason, Stussy suddenly said softly, "What if I can help you?" Orgrim's eyes slowly opened. He did not look at Stussy, but looked at the ceiling of the roof, and said softly, "Stussy, don't get involved in this matter." He was mentioning Stussy. After all, the two of them have been sleeping together for so long, Orgrim will have some feelings for him. If Stussy is really involved in this matter, he will have to kill him. And the reason why he said this was because he felt that Stussy seemed to be preparing to subtly guide him. Otherwise, she is a CP agent, what can she say about helping you? But in Stussy's ears, Orgrim's reminder sounded like concern. After all, this is a big event. If Stussy takes sides here and stands with Orgrim, if Orgrim collapses, the Navy and the world government are likely to settle accounts with Happy Street. Of course, this was Stussy's judgment based on the fact that Orgrim didn't know his identity. "Master Chewie, if someone really takes the wrong path and wants to turn back, is there still a chance?" Stussy put her head on Orgrim's chest and asked softly. "It depends on which way it is, but many times, there is no turning back, and people are responsible for their own choices." Orgrim smiled and responded. Stussy was silent for a while, and then said, "Yes, everyone is responsible for their own choices. Your choice this time may lead to your death, is it right?" "Maybe, but we pirates live with our heads hanging on our belts, so who would be afraid of death?" Orgrim smiled and said, "It's not like I've never died. How do you think I came to this world?" "I'll be afraid." Stussy stretched out her arms and hugged Orgrim tightly, and suddenly said. Orgrim was stunned for a moment, and then said, "You are not a pirate, so it is normal to be afraid of death." "No, I'm afraid you will die," Stussy suddenly raised his head and stared at Orgrim with bright eyes. Orgrim is really confused this time. Let me ask you one last time, Orgrim, have you really not considered giving up in Elru? The aura of Stussy has changed. She is no longer the gentle little woman she used to be. Instead, she is extremely fierce. Orgrim looked at Stussy in surprise, and then said, "That's right." Stussy turned over and sat on Orgrim's body. He held Orgrim's head with both hands. His expression was a little ferocious, a little desperate, a little crazy. "I've had enough of you, idiot. What a fool. Madness. Do not understand anything. Let me tell you, what happened this time was all a conspiracy of the Navy, and Wulaoxing's attitude is very supportive of this. As long as there is no evidence, the world government will not compromise easily with you. They don't even want to catch you, they want to kill you directly. Understand? As long as you go to the Devil's Triangle, you will face the entire Navy's advanced combat power, including Sengoku, Garp, and more. You are no match for them. You are looking for death for Enelu. Even if all of you Warhammer pirates are dispatched, this will be the end." Stussy shook Orgrim's head with a very manic expression and roared. Before Orgrim could react, Stussy slammed Orgrim's head back onto the pillow. Then, with tears in his eyes, he looked at Orgrim with a very painful expression and said, "So listen to me, just listen to me once, don't go, take a step back, give up Enelu." Orgrim looked at Stussy with very surprised eyes, and said in surprise, You. Right? That's right. You idiot, you stupid guy, I am a member of the world government. I, Stussy, am a senior agent of CP-0. I came to Avalon Island from the very beginning for the intelligence of your Warhammer pirates. Yes, we are here to help the world government deal with you. The identity of the Queen of Happy Street is just a cover. Now you know, right? Are you satisfied? Understand? If you want to kill me, then kill me, but in the end, don't go, I beg you, Orgrim," Stussy hissed. In the end, she rested her head on Orgrim's chest, tears streaming down Orgrim's heart, and choked up and said, "I'm really crazy, for you idiot, it's obviously a great achievement." Orgrim was confused all the time. What is going on? Why the hell did you blow yourself up when you disagreed with me? Are you making me embarrassed? You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. A sledgehammer breaks into pirates. Author, Zippo. Chapter 313. Stussy lay on Orgrim's body and cried for a while, but found that Orgrim didn't seem to move. Then she slowly raised her head and looked at Orgrim with tearful eyes. Then she felt a little strange. Orgrim's face was a little dull, a little confused, and a little confused. Only the rage that should have appeared was missing. According to Stussy's expectation, Orgrim should be angry and irritable at this time, and he might even break her neck. After all, I had lied to him for so long and even betrayed him a lot of information. Although this information has not had any impact on the Warhammer pirates before, this behavior is very bad. Before Stussy could speak, Orgrim's eyes gradually became complicated. After a long time, Orgrim murmured helplessly, "Why did you say it? How did you say it? What does it mean?" Stussy was stunned for a moment, then her expression became a little pale, and she said with a look of disbelief, What does it mean?" Orgrim opened his mouth, but he didn't know how to speak. Although Stussy had revealed a lot of information to the world government in the past, it was all done intentionally by Orgrim. Although the nature was bad, but Orgrim is one of those people who works behind the scenes and feels very happy. So I don't have any disgust with Stussy. I just think this woman is very interesting. She thinks she is mysterious, but in fact she has been stripped naked and is just teasing her. The feeling of playing. And this time, The matter is very important. Orgrim has secretly arranged that the Warhammer Pirates station is covered by monitoring phone bug signals. Here, all unauthorized contact signals will be if you send it out, it will be intercepted immediately. This is why Orgrim dared to let Stussy wander here, and just now, he has decided to trap Stussy in the station. As long as she can't leave here, even if it's useless to know any important information. This can be regarded as a test for Stussy by Orgrim. As long as she doesn't blindly participate in this matter, Orgrim can still tolerate her for a while. Continue to keep her by his side, and give false information to the world government from time to time. And if Stussy does anything bad, Orgrim also decides to get rid of this kid. The result will never be to think that Stussy would self-destruct at this time. In Orgrim's mind, she was very conscientious if she could not cause trouble, but he didn't expect that she would confess everything. This was a shock to Orgrim. Grim was a little confused, and all the arrangements for Stussy were disrupted. You suddenly turned the table and stopped playing. How can I tease you in the future? Looking at Orgrim's complicated expression, Stussy, the look of disbelief on her face gradually faded away. Then she forced a smile and said in a sad tone, You already knew this? Right? Do you know my identity? At this moment, Stussy felt that he was a fool, the stupidest kind of person in the world. He originally thought that Orgrim was coveting his beauty, so he was able to take him with him. Now it seems that it is not the case at all. That's not what happened. He was just kidding himself. Orgrim's mouth twitched and he said awkwardly, Ahem, didn't I see that you were enjoying it all the time, so I couldn't bear to expose you. Otherwise, you would be so embarrassed. Stussy. What's your reason, such a child's play? Stussy was silent for a while, staring into Orgrim's eyes. The original fear that Orgrim might kill him in anger dissipated a lot. She looked at Orgrim with piercing eyes, which made Orgrim a little embarrassed to look at him. He even didn't dare to look at Stussy, and his eyes were a little wandering. When did you know that? Stussy asked suddenly. If she had just discovered it recently, it would be okay to say that she could barely accept it in her heart. Orgrim did not dare to look at Stussy. He glanced left and right, and muttered in a guilty tone, What, not too long. When exactly? Stussy suddenly shouted. Orgrim was startled and quickly said, From the beginning, I knew it from the beginning. From our first meeting? Stussy asked in surprise. Ahem, that's right, Orgrim nodded awkwardly and said. But soon, Orgrim became a little strange. No, isn't this something I should be angry about? Why do I act as if I have made a big mistake now? I'm not the spy. It's you, Stussy. Why should I feel guilty? Did I get the wrong script? I'm not a scumbag. You're a scumbag. Orgrim was just about to say something tough. But looking at Stussy's pale face and lost look, Orgrim couldn't say what he said next. How much courage did this woman have to muster up to confess everything to me? Are you putting your life and death at risk just to stop me from saving Enelu? You are a teenager, you are making it difficult for me to do this. If Stussy had not self-destruct and was still the same as before, Orgrim would have no psychological burden. He could crush Stussy to death at any time if he wanted to. But Stussy suddenly played such a trick, and Orgrim had some indescribable feelings for her for a while. I am so silly, yes, how can there be my Stussy companion in this world? I'll have Stussy to lean on, Stussy murmured with a sad smile. I originally thought that Orgrim was the person I wanted, but now I realized that I was just a pawn and a toy in his hands. But I was still moved, even to the point of not being afraid of death for him. In the end, it was so ridiculous. What is all this for? In your eyes, am I ridiculous? Orgrim, Stussy looked at Orgrim and asked sadly. Orgrim wanted to speak to comfort Stussy, but looked at Stussy's expression and eyes. He was silent for a while, and then he looked at Stussy seriously and said, yes, from the very beginning, you seemed ridiculous to me, like a joke, a self-righteous clown. Stussy twitched the corner of her mouth a little, as expected. Why is the sea so vast? Those are the things that liars would say, Stussy murmured softly. Then, Stussy looked at Orgrim again and said, thank you for not lying to me this time. At least in the last moment, I didn't act like a fool. No. How to say, this matter, more complicated, right? Orgrim smacked his lips, not knowing what to say. It's obviously you who came here to bully you. From my point of view, it's normal for me to bully you, right? Is it reasonable? Why do I feel so guilty now? Make it seem like I, Orgrim, am just like a scumbag. Is very complicated, although I want to tear you apart now. I know that this is not your fault, Stussy whispered softly. Then a sad smile appeared on her face and she asked Orgrim, from the beginning, you just treat me as a self-righteous clown and a toy, thinking that when the time is right, you will kill me, right? Orgrim was silent for a moment, then nodded and said absolutely. But before Stussy could speak, Orgrim continued, actually, I have also been soft-hearted. For example, in this meeting, the safest plan is not to bring you at all. Although even if I bring you, I still have the ability to control you, but how do you put it? Anyway, in my opinion, as long as you don't go too far, I have no intention of doing anything to you. Ha ha ha, it's like you have a pet. As long as the pet doesn't bite you, it doesn't matter if you act a little bit, right? Stussy said with a sad smile. Roughly the same, Orgrim nodded honestly. At this time, you should tell some lies to deceive me and comfort me, Stussy looked at Orgrim with complicated eyes. Didn't you just thank me for not lying to you? Why are you women so troublesome? Orgrim resisted the desire to complain, and then said, although the intentions of both of us are very impure, we have been together for such a long time, and we know each other somewhat, right? You also know me. You know, if you treated me with deceit, I would naturally treat you with deceit, but now that you have confessed to me, I will naturally answer your questions honestly. Stussy looked into Orgrim's eyes, with many thoughts in her mind. She had imagined many endings. And what I think about the most is the most unreliable, such as, Orgrim forgives himself or something. But Stussy also knew that the possibility was not very high, so although she didn't want to admit it, she also understood that after this confession, her most likely end would be to die without a burial place. She had thought of many ways to die. But I never expected that it would be a scene like this. Orgrim, that bastard, has known my identity from the beginning. I have been fooled by him in the past few years. You say, you will answer my questions honestly, right? Stussy suddenly asked. Orgrim nodded, thinking that you are already like this, and if I play tricks with you again, will you still be a human being? I can't bear it in my conscience. That's right. Orgrim responded. Stussy nodded slightly, and then looked a little hesitant, a little entangled, and even a little afraid of this question. But after all, Stussy felt that even if he was going to die, he should die clearly. At this point, no matter what the answer is, she wants to know the result. Have you ever had feelings for me? Have you ever loved me? Stussy asked with a complicated look in her eyes, looking at Orgrim with some expectation and some fear. Orgrim was stunned for a moment. He thought Stussy would ask him what to do with her. To be honest, Orgrim really didn't think about this question. But he didn't expect Stussy to ask such a classic hypocritical question. Have you ever loved me? Are we two crazy men and resentful women? No, is it just a matter of driving at each other's driving schools? We agreed to take care of our kidneys but not our hearts. What's happening here? Orgrim's expression was a little complicated and he opened his mouth. He knew that at this time, there was a standard answer. Don't ask, just ask, and you've loved it? But he didn't want to say such things, because he promised Stussy to answer this question honestly. So after a while of silence, Orgrim shook his head and said, "I'm sorry, never loved." "Ha ha ha, he, Stussy smiled, laughed, and burst into tears. "What a fool, what a fool. At the end, you still ask a question like this that you already know the answer to. But, there are still feelings. I have said it before. I am a little soft-hearted towards you. This is also because I have indeed had feelings for you. Although you are a bit stupid, you are a woman with great appearance and explosive figure. Your temperament is extremely good, and coupled with this self-righteous stupidity, it's also a little cute. There's no reason why any man wouldn't like you, right? If it's a pity, I can only say that I have known your identity and that you have bad intentions, so how could I really fall in love with you? Do you underestimate me, Orgrim?" "Stussy," Orgrim whispered softly. Stussy listened to Orgrim's words in silence. After a long time, she said in other words, "If you don't know my identity, or I am just the queen of Happy Street, is there any possibility of falling in love with me?" Orgrim stretched out his hand and scratched his head a little. "Can you please stop opening your mouth and shut up and have sex here? This makes me a little embarrassed." That's right, even though Orgrim is usually very carefree, he is actually a bit shy when it comes to things like this. However, after being silent for a while, Orgrim still spoke reluctantly. "Maybe. If Stussy wasn't a kid, she was just the queen of Fun Street. Will he fall in love with her and be attracted to her?" Orgrim doesn't know, but it was precisely because of this lack of clarity that made him feel guilty and embarrassed. Stussy knew that she shouldn't have any expectations at this time, otherwise she would look so pitiful and humble. Now, leaving gracefully or dying would be considered dignified, right? But after hearing the words "maybe" from Orgrim, all of Stussy's reserve suddenly collapsed. She reached out and touched Orgrim's cheek, and asked with a trembling tone, "What should I do now?" "Just be Stussy, just Stussy, is there time?" A Sledgehammer Breaks into Pirates. Author, Zippo. Chapter 314. At noon the next day, I barely slept last night. So Orgrim got up very late today. At this time, he was sitting on the sofa in the living room, holding a teacup in his hand, drinking tea and thinking about something. Before, there was a high probability that the world government and the Navy were behind this. But that was really just suspicion, and now, this matter has been hammered down by Stussy. There is no need to guess or doubt, behind Moria stands the Navy and the world government. And this time, they set up a trap like this, waiting for them to die. There is no doubt that this is the routine used by the Navy in the battle on top. But Orgrim can't be like Whitebeard and directly fight to confront the Navy headquarters. Isn't this sick? I have this idea, but I don't have the strength. However, with Stussy's self-destruction, this matter has taken a big turn for the better. To a certain extent, Orgrim can also turn from passive to active, at least the conspiracy inside has been figured out first. Of course, it is useless to use Stussy as evidence to attack the world government. Once this method is used, it is impossible for the world government to recognize Stussy as one of theirs. However, apart from this, there are many more operable aspects. It's just that Orgrim hasn't sorted out this mess yet. And in his heart, he didn't really want to use Stussy anymore. After taking 2 sips of tea slowly, Stussy walked out of the bedroom wearing pajamas and a sleepy expression. She yawned lazily at first, and her eyes were still slightly red and swollen. It seemed that even though he had had a good sleep, the edema in his eyes from crying still failed to dissipate. Looking at Stussy at this time, he looked a little funny and a little ugly, but this kind of ugliness made Orgrim feel very cute. Noticing Orgrim's gaze staring at her, Stussy's face turned slightly red, and then she glared at Orgrim fiercely. After asking that question last night, Orgrim did not answer her directly, but instead pressed her on the bed with his backhand and kissed her domineeringly. Sometimes, there is no need to talk, just do it and it will be done. This can be regarded as a true candid meeting between the two. There was no deception or lies. I don't know if it was an illusion. I always feel that this time is better than before, a little more flavorful. In the process, Stussy finally got the answer he wanted. Orgrim was already making a statement by not killing her. Unlike Orgrim, Stussy walked to the refrigerator, took out a carton of milk and poured it into a cup. Then, holding the milk, he leaned against the refrigerator and drank it one sip after another. Neither of them spoke, except for the occasional sound of drinking water. After a long time, Stussy suddenly asked, "I didn't even ask last night, does everyone know it? My identity?" Orgrim glanced at Stussy with a questioning expression, and then said, "Isn't that of course? Otherwise, if someone misunderstands something and tells you confidential matters that should not be disclosed, aren't I going to die? Are you so sure that I will betray you?" Stussy looked at Orgrim angrily. Orgrim looked at Stussy in surprise and said, "Don't you know how?" Stussy wanted to defend herself, but in the end she said angrily yes. Orgrim curled his lips non-committally, and then continued to drink tea slowly. Stussy became angry when she saw him like this, and couldn't help complaining, "Then what should I do now? Forget it when I didn't know. Now that I know everything, how can I have the nerve to go see them? You have to understand that you are abandoning evil and doing good, putting down the butcher knife and becoming a Buddha immediately. The prodigal son has turned back. This is a very glorious thing. What is there to be embarrassed about? I think everyone will applaud and cheer for you." Orgrim smiled and joked. Stussy almost jumped up and killed Orgrim. "I am the Queen of Happy Street, a CP-0 senior agent, and now I am your Orgrim's man. Are you giving up evil and following good? I am abandoning good and following evil, okay. I picked up the butcher knife and turned into a devil immediately. And the prodigal son turned back." Looking at Stussy's expression of anger and indescribable, Orgrim smiled again. For some reason, he always felt that this woman was very cute today, not as cute as before. It feels fake. In the past, when had Stussy dared to grin at him? Okay, don't worry, I will arrange this matter well and no one will laugh at you." Orgrim took a sip of tea. Stussy looked at Orgrim with a complicated expression, and then asked, "Do you really believe me like this? You are like this, how can I still not believe you?" Orgrim said helplessly. "Maybe, this is my routine? I'll suppress it first and then raise it. I'll be honest with you on the surface. In fact, I have other plans and so on," Stussy said a little harshly. "It's not that I look down on you, Stussy, with your IQ, I'm afraid it's difficult to do this," Orgrim said very frankly. Stussy's expression changed. Who was she looking down on? But before she could get angry, Orgrim put on a gentle smile again on his face and said, as the saying goes, "Gentle Township, Tomb of Heroes, if this is true, it is because I, Orgrim, am blind, and I was killed. You, a cunning guy, deceived me, didn't I say that? Everyone will make a choice, and after making a choice, they have to bear responsibility. I chose the path myself, and I can accept any result. Orgrim is also a decisive person. He will not hesitate when he decides something. Before, he believed that Stussy was a bastard, so he would definitely not fall in love with her, and he would kill her when it was time to kill her. But now, he thinks that Stussy is no longer a threat to him, so he will not give special treatment just because of some unfounded suspicions." Stussy felt a little warm in her heart after listening to Orgrim's words, and the stubborn look on her face also dissipated. She slowly walked to Orgrim's side, put her hand on Orgrim's shoulder, and started to knead it. "Orgrim," Stussy said softly. "Wait, I've been wanting to ask since last night, didn't you always call me Master Chewie?" Orgrim suddenly said. Stussy suddenly exerted force on his hand, trying to pinch Orgrim's soft flesh, but found that this guy had rough skin and thick flesh, and there was no extreme reaction at all. Well? Yes, this is the strength. I have said it before, you use such little strength every time, there is no point in massaging at all, Orgrim said with shameless enjoyment. Stussy was even more angry, but couldn't do anything to Orgrim. Finally, she cursed and said, in order to please you and lower your wariness towards me, I was always obedient to you. I opened and closed my mouth and called you Master Chewy to make you feel happy. I can't find the southeast, northwest, and northwest, but now, I have said what I need to say, and I am free to kill or chop you. Do I still need to please you? Don't you love me? Don't you like me? Orgrim asked in surprise. Stussy's face instantly turned red with embarrassment. Is it possible to say such a thing casually? Last night, it was just because he was in a mood and was too excited that he said it. You said those words, but now, it's shameful to think about it, you still mention it? Who loves you? Stussy scolded fiercely. Then, before Orgrim could speak, Stussy's tone softened again. Orgrim, although what I say now has no credibility and I cannot give you an effective guarantee, from now on, I, Stussy, will never betray you or deceive you again, Stussy said softly. A slight smile appeared on Orgrim's lips. Then he hummed softly. Stussy didn't see his expression. Seeing how perfunctory Orgrim's participation was, she just felt a rush of blood feeding the dog. I feel a little embarrassed to tell you this sincerely. And you were like, huh? But before Stussy's anger rose, Orgrim asked softly, then how are you going to explain to the world government now? What about the Happy Street matter? How to arrange it? This queen, what are you still doing? Do you want to do it or not? Stussy didn't answer anything, but slowly rubbed Orgrim's shoulders. Orgrim didn't ask any questions, and the two of them stayed quiet like this, without anyone speaking. Just when Orgrim finished drinking the tea in the teacup, Stussy said, it depends on what you want. Orgrim frowned slightly, and then said, what do you mean it depends on what I want? Although I told you everything, the world government does not know these things, so if you want, I can become a double agent. After all, you had this intention from the beginning, right? But at that time, you were taking advantage of the information gap between you and me, making me passively become this kind of double agent. Now, no more trouble, Stussy said softly. Before Orgrim could speak, Stussy paused for a moment and continued, as for Happy Street, although the world government invested a lot of money to support my establishment of Happy Street, so far, my control over the entire Happy Street is very strong. Who among them is from the world government and who doesn't know the truth at all? I know very well. If you need it, I can bring the world government to you. The Happy Street becomes the Happy Street of the Warhammer pirates. Orgrim raised his hand to fill his teacup with tea. Then, he held the teacup and took a sip. Although I have never done any work as an agent or spy, Stussy, it must be very tiring to live wearing a mask, right? Orgrim asked softly. The movements of Stussy's hands were slightly stagnant, and she did not answer the question. You are right, letting you become a double agent is the most beneficial option for me, Orgrim said softly again. Stussy's movements this time were very coherent, as if there was no wavering in his heart at all. But, no need, Orgrim suddenly smiled and said. A smile also appeared on Stussy's face. It seemed that she had already known that Orgrim would say this. I am not that despicable world government that always likes to play these conspiracies and tricks, and I have no intention of hanging my future on a woman. So, stop shouldering these things you don't like, Stussy. From now on, you are no longer a spy or agent, but a pirate. When Orgrim said this, he paused for a moment, and then continued, you said that only liars would say the sentence, the sea is extremely wide. That's wrong, because the sea is indeed extremely wide, Everyone can find a home on the sea, no matter good or bad, and in this sea, the freest ones are us pirates. Being pirates. Orgrim turned his head when he said this, looked at Stacy and said, as a pirate, you can't go against your own heart. Stacy. Are you preaching to me? Stussy smiled, looked at Orgrim and said. Of course, after all, in the pirate industry, I am your senior. Orgrim responded with a smile. Well, it's good for the last time, once I solve Ennelu's problem this time, I won't be a spy anymore. Stussy suddenly said. Orgrim was stunned for a moment. I just said so much that I want you not to have any psychological burden. Why can't you turn around? Just when Orgrim still wants to, when he said a few words, Stussy smiled and said, no need to say more, Orgrim, this is my true intention. You told me that as a pirate, you cannot violate your true intention. Let me help you as a spy at the end, Orgrim. Maybe you think I'm stupid, but I did betray your information as a spy. And in the end, before ending this identity, I want to become your Orgrim's spy, and use your Orgrim's flag to end this painful past for me. Orgrim looked at the smile on Stussy's face, but he still couldn't speak after all. If this is your last choice as a spy and your first choice as a pirate, then, as a captain, what reason do I have to stop you? A sledgehammer breaks into pirates. Author, Zippo. Chapter 315. In Orgrim's courtyard, Orgrim was chatting with Robin and Lucci. Lord Orgrim, brother Ennelu was caught by that damn Moria, let me save him, Lucci said angrily. Looking at his grinning face, he seemed to be going to tear Moria into pieces. But before Orgrim could speak, Robin said directly, even Annie, you can't defeat him on the road, let alone you. And the thing behind this matter is definitely not that simple. Why can't I do this? I am very powerful, Lucci said unconvinced. Orgrim stretched out his hand and punched Lucci on the head. He laughed and said, you are 10,000 years too early. You should practice hard for me. You can do this. Just don't worry about it. If Robin said Lucci, Lucci would be very unconvinced, but if Orgrim said him, he could only purse his lips and nod helplessly. Brother Ennelu, if you are not a brother, I won't save you. Lord Orgrim really disagrees, just ask for your blessings and say goodbye. Then, Orgrim looked at Robin with interest and asked, how do you know what's going on behind this? Not simple. Robin held a book in her arms. Listening to Orgrim's inquiry, she thought for a moment, and then said, there are too many strange things here. Moria has no strength to challenge us, but he just did this, and after capturing Enel, not only did he not use it as a basis to attack the New World, but he quickly withdrew and returned to the Devil's Triangle. This is very unreasonable. I guess, as a king, if you go to the Shichibukai, doing this may be arranged by the Navy and the world government. Gee ha 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 ha, Orgrim laughed loudly, then reached out and rubbed Robin's little head, and said, yes, very smart. To tell you the truth, this matter was indeed arranged by the Navy and the world government. They are waiting. I'm going to die. After hearing this, Lucci suddenly became anxious and said, Lord Orgrim, what should we do? Are we going to save Brother Ennelu? But if we go, it will be very dangerous. Ah! Robin glanced at Lucci with contempt and said, since Lord Orgrim already knows about this matter, there must be his arrangements. The reason why a conspiracy is that it cannot be exposed by others. See, it won't work if you see it. Orgrim nodded and comforted them casually, but didn't say anything more. Robin is indeed very smart, but behind this, it is not just a simple conspiracy, it can be said to be a conspiracy. At this moment, Beckman hurriedly walked in from outside. When he saw Orgrim chatting with two little guys here, he became even more anxious. Orgrim, Beckman came over eagerly. Orgrim turned his head and glanced at him, then asked, what's wrong? What happened again? Or have you come up with some solution? Is Daipeng back? It is impossible for Orgrim to directly force Daipeng to serve as a substitute messenger in the Devil's Triangle. Even if he is the captain, he must first respect the ideas of his own cadres. After all, this matter is indeed unkind, so it is better to first ask Daipeng to see what she means, but based on Orgrim's estimation of her, she probably won't refuse. Although Daipeng is also a bit lonely, she has been a member of the Warhammer Pirates for a long time. When she was under the banner of Shiji, she was also the first to fall to Orgrim. Over the years, Orgrim has never treated her badly. She has a very good relationship with Enel, Lucci, and Robin. That's right. There's no reason to ignore her. After all, she's not really asking her to die. What's wrong? Beckman was stunned for a moment. Then he frowned and said, "What's wrong? I also want to ask you what's wrong. Why did Stussy leave the station and return to Happy Street? Are you crazy? Don't you know who she is?" Although no effective plan was discussed at yesterday's meeting, there were many matters that should be kept confidential. Even if you don't arrest her, you should still keep her with you and keep an eye on her all the time. How can you put her back on Happy Street? Are you mesmerized by that woman's beauty? What kind of ecstasy soup did she give you? Orgrim. Ogrim was a little confused by Beckman's face-to-face lecture. After regaining his consciousness for a while, Orgrim said Stussy will disappear for a long time at a time like this. If so, the world government will wonder if something happened to her. What I mean is that she went back to say she was safe. She's so damn safe. She will report all our information to the world government, Beckman shouted angrily. Just as Orgrim was about to say something, he saw a pretty figure walking in from the courtyard door. Then, a playful smile appeared on the corner of Orgrim's lips. Lucci and Robin also saw that figure. It was Queen Stussy. Just as Lucci was about to speak, Robin stopped him and gave Lucci a fierce look. Beckman's back was facing that way. So he didn't realize that Stussy had come back. Seeing that Orgrim didn't speak, he became more and more angry. "I think you are just fascinated by that vixen Stussy. Let me tell you, this matter was already very difficult to handle, but now that you have released Stussy, it will become even more difficult once the other side knows our thoughts. If Enel really can't be saved and dies there, you should savor the pain." "This is your fault as the captain," Baker scolded angrily. "Yes, you are right. I am fascinated by that vixen Stussy. You can't blame me. She is so charming. She is beautiful, has a good figure, and has a great temperament. Let me ask you, what do you think of her as a woman?" Orgrim asked with a smile. "I don't mean to be playful with you. Can you be more serious?" Beckman was furious when he saw that Orgrim still dared to laugh. But after a pause, Beckman sighed again and said, "But you're right, that woman is indeed very attractive. It's not incomprehensible to make a mistake. We are all men, but the situation is not good now. If Stussy really reports all this information to the world government, then we must change a plan. Of course, this is also somewhat advantageous, that is, Stussy can be used to confuse the world government. Let's try another method and take it by surprise, but Orgrim, when we have another meeting to discuss, we must not bring Stussy with us. When she comes back, she must be detained in the station and monitored closely." Before Orgrim could speak, Stussy's voice came from behind Beckman. "Why can't you take Stussy with you?" Stussy asked with a smile. "Need to ask why?" "Because she is an agent of the CP agency," Beckman replied subconsciously, then his expression was stunned for a moment, his neck was a little stiff, and he slowly turned his head to look at Stussy. Stussy had a smile on her face, looked at Beckman with a stiff face with interest, and then said with a smile, "Sure enough, you already know my true identity." Beckman forced a smile and said, "Sister-in-law, what are you talking about?" I'm just kidding, Orgrim. Ha ha ha, Beckman, are you taking me for a fool? Stussy said with a smile. When Beckman saw this, he stopped pretending and said with a serious expression, you are indeed a bit stupid. You dare to come back. After hearing our conversation, you didn't run away immediately and came up to follow us. We say hello. The smile on Stussy's face became even thicker, and he said with a smile, why should I escape? This is the Warhammer Pirates. As long as Orgrim still trusts me, I will never be in danger. Orgrim? No, he never trusted you, Beckman said in a deep voice. At this moment, Orgrim also spoke. If Beckman continues talking, Stussy might have to settle accounts with him that night. Okay, I just have something to tell you. Orgrim pulled Beckman and said. Beckman looked at Stussy, then nodded and said, I am really confused and need your explanation. A cunning look flashed in Stussy's eyes, and she glanced at Orgrim with a wicked smile on her lips, and then said, what's the explanation for this? Orgrim has chosen to join us. Orgrim was stunned for a moment, and so was Beckman. Then Beckman looked at Orgrim in surprise and said, what do you mean? He did not believe Stussy's words directly, but wanted to get the answer from Orgrim. Orgrim's reaction speed was also very fast. Looking at Beckman's surprised expression, he couldn't help but smile in his heart. You usually have a superb IQ and feel like you are sure of victory in everything you do. Today I finally caught you. I got the chance to tease you. So Orgrim's face straightened up a little, and he reached out and patted Beckman on the shoulder and said, I have been thinking recently, should people be brave enough to innovate, try the impossible, take a new step, and don't always is living in one's own comfort zone. Speak English, Beckman directly interrupted Orgrim's pretentious words and said. Ahem, that's it? The world government said that as long as I join the King's Shishibukai, Enelu will be returned. I thought about it carefully, and it seemed like a good idea. This would be good for you, me, and everyone, so I decided to become King Shishibukai and become the most loyal partner of the world government. From today on, we are members of the world government. What do you think? Ah, by the way, Stussy has revealed her identity, Orgrim patted Beckman on the shoulder and said. Beckman was stunned. When you mentioned the world government and the Navy last night, you looked like you were gnashing your teeth and wanting to kill them. Why has it become like this now? Return the king to the Shishibukai. Are you really sick? Your Majesty's Shishibukai has become a trash can now, why are you still trying to get in there? What's our plan? What are our plans for the future of Warhammer Pirates Avalon? Will everything be disrupted? Don't you even know to discuss such an important matter with us first? You have changed, Orgrim, you are not the Orgrim you were before. Just when Beckman was overwhelmed with thoughts, he was at a loss. Stussy couldn't help laughing and said, I usually see Beckman looking very powerful, but today I saw his overwhelmed expression. Gee ha 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 ha, maybe I was scared, Orgrim laughed. Beckman came back to his senses. His expression was still a little surprised, but he quickly calmed down. His eyes wandered back and forth between Orgrim and Stussy, his expression very strange. He soon became a little surprised and unbelievable. He was really shocked when he heard that Orgrim was going to join the Seven Warriors Sea, but soon he understood that this was simply impossible. The bastard is playing tricks on him. And looking at the state between him and Stussy, it is obviously very different from yesterday's meeting. And Stussy's identity must have been revealed. If Orgrim hadn't turned to Stussy, then there was only one conclusion. Stussy had turned to Orgrim. What the hell is this? Are your CP-0 agents so unscrupulous? This is what you are, Beckman said with a little hesitation. Let me introduce to you, this is MS Stussy, a newly debuted pirate, former CP-0 agent, and Queen of Happy Street. Orgrim said with a smile. Stacy winked at Beckman playfully and said with a smile on his lips, "You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment." A Sledgehammer Breaks into Pirates. Author, Zippo. Chapter 316. After a long time, Beckman sat quietly on a chair in the Orgrim courtyard, falling into deep contemplation. What script is this? Why haven't I seen it? Stussy actually defected to us? What kind of operation is this? Didn't you, Orgrim, agree at the beginning to only take away the kidneys and not the heart? Ah, no, it was Stussy who got distracted first. This shouldn't be the case. You Stussy are one of the ace agents of the world government. So unscrupulous. Can you be more dedicated? Although I really want to doubt Stussy's motives, is there any conspiracy here? But Stussy's timing was so perfect. Just when the Warhammer pirates were in a dilemma, she came out and was very likely to break the situation. Doubts here. And Orgrim is not really a fool, on the contrary, he is extremely shrewd. Thinking of this, Beckman had to accept the fact that Orgrim, a ruthless man, put Stussy to sleep. I couldn't help but look up at Orgrim, his eyes full of admiration. As expected of you. Have something to say? Orgrim asked with a smile. Beckman was silent for a moment, and then said, "You have already made this choice. Of course I support you and believe you." As soon as he finished speaking, Beckman looked at Stussy and said, "Stussy, although I know what you want to say, but I will not betray Orgrim." Stussy said with a smile, with a gentle look on her face. Beckman originally wanted to warn Stussy, but after seeing her expression, he didn't say anything in the end, but nodded. Approved. I really never expected that the phrase sister-in-law could actually hold true, Beckman complained with a smile. Then, without waiting for Orgrim and Stussy to speak, Beckman said with a serious expression, "But the joke just now also gave me some inspiration. Orgrim, if we become King Shishibukai, what will happen to the world government? Will you let people go? If possible, this can be regarded as a method. Anyway, you can quit after 3 to 5 days." As soon as he finished speaking, before Orgrim could say anything, Stussy said he shook his head and said, "It's impossible. To be honest, the world government did have the idea of recruiting you before and wanted to make Orgrim one of the 7 Marshalseas under the king. But now, it's impossible. The world government will thinking that they have the initiative, their first goal is to eradicate Orgrim. Yes, they have no intention of arresting him at all, but want to kill him." Beckman nodded after hearing this and said, "Sure enough, is that so?" Thinking about it, the world government finally seized a good opportunity to deal with Orgrim, so how could it agree to let him join the Shishibukai? How could he not have imagined that this was Orgrim's conspiracy? Join the king's Shishibukai, and wait for Eniru to come back, then quit? The probability of this is very high. The world government must be stupid to believe in Orgrim's integrity. If Orgrim really played this trick, then the not-so-good signboard of King Shishibukai would be completely smashed. It has really become a trash can. I just returned to Happy Street and reported the situation to the world government, saying that you have decided to rescue Enelu, but I suspect there is a conspiracy behind it and are still making plans. No plan has been determined yet. The government didn't suspect anything, so it bought some more time." Stussy said softly. Beckman nodded. This is normal. Although the world government and the navy did not leave any evidence, they would not treat the Warhammer pirates as fools. Stussy said this. The words seemed very meaningful, but in fact, nothing was revealed to the world government. Instead, it gave them reassurance that the Warhammer pirates chose to save Enel. In this way, they should be patient and wait. Beckman seemed to have thought of something. He glanced at Stussy and wanted to say something, but in the end, he looked at Orgrim, thought for a while, and said nothing. Stacy 11 seemed to see what Beckman was thinking, and said, Beckman, if there is anything you need me to do in this incident, just tell me directly. I have already discussed it with Orgrim. Orgrim also nodded and said that's right. Beckman smiled and said, in that case, I won't be polite. What I mean is that if the arrangement is good, if the sister-in-law becomes a double agent, maybe it can solve the previous difficulty. If Stussy is involved, then the matter of Daipeng acting as Orgrim is likely to be hidden from the world government and the navy. But this requires some planning, and Beckman has not thought about it yet. Okay, I didn't have a plan at all, just because, I just came here in a hurry. In this case, I have to go back and think about it. Anyway, I still have plenty of time. Let's wait for Daipeng to come back. Beckman thought for a moment and said. Then, Beckman didn't leave anything behind. He stood up and left. Stussy didn't bother with Orgrim here, but said with a smile, I'm going to find Ni. Man and the Sphinx, tell them all these things. Don't you need my help? Orgrim asked. No need, I'd better face these things myself. Stussy chuckled. At the same time, on the Whitebeard pirates, Newgate looked at the newspaper in his hand with a sneer. The news reported on it was that Moria had captured Enel, and declare war on the Warhammer pirates. You have quite a skill, Navy, Newgate sneered. There is no doubt that Newgate has also seen something. This kind of thing will at most deceive those clueless little pirates. For big guys like them, who can see at a higher level, they will naturally notice something unusual. Although the reputation of the King's Shishibukai has become very bad, there are still many pirates on the sea who think that the King's Shishibukai is very powerful. When they read this kind of newspaper, they don't think much about it and just think that it is nothing. This guy Leah is just going to cause trouble. But in Newgate's view, who is Moria, who dares to challenge Orgrim? No one supports him behind this. How is that possible? Dad, it seems something big is going to happen. How do you think that bastard Orgrim will deal with this? Marco smacked his lips and asked. The best choice is of course to give up Enelu and settle the score with Moria later, but I guess that Orgrim guy won't do this, otherwise his reputation will be completely ruined, Newgate said with a smile. Then if they really accepted the challenge, wouldn't they be involved in a conspiracy? Could he be that stupid? Marco asked again. It depends on who is more powerful, him or the person behind the scenes. Maybe he can think of some way to break the situation, Newgate said very casually. Although he was very interested in this matter, he seemed to be able to foresee that something big was going to happen. But Newgate was only interested in this matter. This matter had nothing to do with him. Not big. I have to say that if Warring States is planning, then this old guy's methods have improved a bit. On the sea, those who can understand the meaning behind are all powerful guys, and once Orgrim accepts the challenge, he will not only it's as simple as dealing with Moria. By then, their territory in the New World will most likely become weak. Isn't this an opportunity? The Sengoku guy is also using the power of pirates to deal with Orgrim invisibly, Newgate said. People who can understand the meaning behind this are all people who have the ability to threaten Orgrim, such as Whitebeard, Kaido, and Charlotte Lingling, and others who have not yet opportunities but good second-rate players. They can understand that once Orgrim takes up the challenge, it will not be as simple as taking care of Moria. If there is only Moria, they will not do anything rashly, because maybe Orgrim Reem walked around and ended the matter. But the current situation is that once the Warhammer pirates challenge, they are likely to be doomed. Isn't this an opportunity to carve up them in the New World? As Avalon gets more and more done, the better, the more and more pirates covet these places. Dad, what will we do if the Navy uses this method to deal with us one day? Marco suddenly asked. Whitebeard laughed. Cool la 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 la, then I will sink their naval headquarters to the bottom of the sea, Newgate said boldly. On the other side, on the Inagashima Island in Wano country, Kaido also noticed the news. He looked at the newspaper, frowning and feeling a little unhappy. I didn't beat that bastard Moria to death at first, but now I'm causing trouble for Brother Orgrim. I always feel a little sorry for him. Kaido smacked his lips and muttered to himself. Fortunately for this guy, Orgrim didn't even think of this, but he took the initiative to take the blame. Yes, if Kaido had just hammered Moria to death, wouldn't all this nonsense be gone? I don't know how this guy's brain circuits are when it comes to dealing with Orgrim. Anyway, Kaido feels a little ashamed. Just when Kaido was thinking about all this, the phone on his desk suddenly rang. Kaido glanced at the phone bug, frowned slightly and said, "Doflamingo." Without thinking much, Kaido quickly picked up the phone bug. "Doflamingo? What's up?" Kaido answered the phone and asked directly. "Fu, Boss Kaido, I have a message for you on behalf of Mr. Hammer." Doflamingo smiled evilly. Kaido's expression was stunned. "Brother Orgrim, do you have something to say to me? Why didn't he contact me directly? Should we go from Doflamingo instead?" "Ah, yes, they must be worried that the Navy will monitor their signal waves, right? Although as long as the encryption level is high enough, the Navy can't easily catch any signal waves, but it can prevent them from doing anything. After all, their current situation is a bit delicate." Kaido quickly found a reason for Orgrim. As everyone knows, Orgrim doesn't want to contact him directly, for fear that he will sound like a good brother, and he really can't bear it. What does Brother Orgrim have to say? "Do you need my help?" "Ah ha ha ha." Kaido laughed. If Orgrim really asked him for help, Kaido felt that he would be very happy. Is it finally the turn of the two brothers to show off their skills? Catch the Navy headquarters and beat them up? But before Kaido could, Doflamingo is dreaming about a better future here, and Doflamingo said, "Master Hammer said, I hope Boss Kaido can put some pressure on the Big Mom pirates, make a gesture, buy him some time, and get Molly Ya deal with these things." Kaido's expression fell a little when he heard this. "Is that it? I've even thought about starting a full-scale war with you to fight against the world government and the Navy headquarters. Although this will have a great impact, and it's not reliable plan. But, that's it? Put pressure on Lingling? Ah, is it because you are worried that Lingling will get involved in this incident and hinder Orgrim's good brother, causing some trouble?" Although he and Lingling were companions on the same boat before, their relationship was not very deep. "What's more, it's just pressure, not war." So Kaido said without hesitation, "I know, tell my good brother, I will take care of this matter." After saying that, Kaido did not give Doflamingo a chance to be polite, and directly hang up the phone bug. Doflamingo was on the other side of the phone, looking at the phone that had been hung up, feeling helpless. Isn't the different treatment of Kaido this guy too obvious? If Master Zui called Joan personally, he would probably be able to talk about it all day long, right? No wonder Lord Hammer asked him to contact Kaido and tell him about the matter. A sledgehammer breaks into pirates. Author, Zippo. Chapter 317. In the Devil's Triangle, on the terrifying three-mast sailing ship. In the prison in Moria Castle. At this time, Enilu's arms were spread out in big letters, and he was chained to the wall by sea tower stone shackles. His body looked very weak, and there were some dried and black blood stains on his body. With his head hanging on his chest, Enilu didn't move at all. If it weren't for the fact that his chest was still rising and falling with his breathing, he might have been thought to be a dead person. It was very quiet in the dark prison, and only one person, Enilu, was imprisoned in this place. With his eyes slightly closed, Enilu seemed to be sleeping. But at this moment, the prison door was suddenly opened, and then, there was a burst of footsteps in the corridor. Not long after, Moria's huge figure walked up to Enilu's cage. Enilu also slowly opened his eyes. Although his body was very weak, his eyes were still unruly. He raised his head and looked at the huge Moria. A sarcastic smile appeared on the corner of Eniro's mouth and said, "The Navy's lackey wants to get some information about the Warhammer pirates from me again? Stop wasting your time, you coward doomed to fail at sea." Moria's originally smiling face gradually turned cold. "Humph, if I am a loser, then who are you, who is imprisoned in my cage now?" Molia snorted coldly. "You know what I am, but I'm just a loser who doesn't even dare to enter the new world." King Shichibukai, haha, you have such a great reputation. Without the support of the Navy, do you dare to appear in front of Mr. Chui? Enilu mocked unceremoniously. After hearing this, Moria became more and more angry, and the shadows under his feet became distorted. Enilu's face still had a smile of disdain and ridicule. But soon, the angry look on Mariah's body dissipated, and the shadow under his feet returned to calm. "Do you want to provoke me into killing you? I won't let you get what you want," Mariah said with an evil smile. Enilu's face did look a little disappointed. He knew that he had done something bad. If it was just Mariah, there would be nothing to worry about, but Garp he also participated in his capture, which means that the Navy is the real leader in this matter. He used himself as bait to lure Lord Orgrim into the game. Enel didn't know that Orgrim can he see the conspiracy behind this, but he knows that if he dies, he may be able to eliminate all these troubles. "Ha ha ha, you are such a courageous guy. Without these plots and tricks, you wouldn't dare to face Mr. Chui. Even if I, a prisoner, mock you like this, you don't dare or can't kill me. It seems that you are really not that powerful. Having to be submissive in front of the Navy really brings shame to the pirates. A guy like you is not worthy of being a pirate at all," Enilu mocked wildly. A ruthless look flashed in Mariah's eyes, but it quickly dissipated and he said, "You can only be arrogant here for a few days, just showing off your rhetoric. Wait. Orgrim and your companions are here. I will send you to die together. When the time comes, your corpses will become my soldiers and fight for me in the new world. Avalon is a very good place. Not only suitable for Orgrim, but also suitable for me." Hip hop ha ha ha. "Do you deserve Avalon?" Enilu mocked disdainfully. Then before Moria could speak, Enilu continued, "A coward like you cannot survive in the new world. You have already proven this, loser." "Whatever you say," Molia said nonchalantly, and then he said with an evil smile, "I'm here today to tell you good news. Your dear captain has decided to accept the challenge. He is leading come toward the Devil's Triangle, your death is not far away." When Enel heard Mariah's words, the look in his eyes was a little excited, not happy and excited, but worried. But soon, Enel said, "Maybe your death is coming, Molia, remember, either you kill me right here, or never let me get out of this prison, otherwise, I will definitely let you understand what terror is in the future." At the same time, in the Navy headquarters, the Warring States Admiral was having a meeting with many Navy generals. "Is there anything going on at Moria?" the Warring States General asked. "Now the situation is moving step by step towards the Navy's plan. If something goes wrong with this guy Moria, it will be ruined. Garp is sitting there, and even if Mariah has any ideas, he can't make any waves," Consultant Ahe said softly. "Very good, let's discuss our next arrangements." After waiting for so long, the bastard Orgrim finally accepted the challenge on behalf of the Warhammer pirates. This shows that they may not have come up with any good way to solve this matter. In fact, we did it very carefully. It seems like a conspiracy, but in fact, Orgrim has no choice unless he gives up, Enel Warring States said. "With that guy's madness, we don't rule out the possibility that he will fight us to the death, such as slaughtering the franchised countries of the New World," Zifa said softly. The Warring States General sighed slightly, then picked up a document from the table and said, "This is an order given by the 5 Old Stars. The Navy must not compromise because of this. Once Orgrim really does such a thing, the 5 Old Stars authorize our naval headquarters to immediately execute Enelu according to the situation." If Orgrim really chooses to massacre the franchised countries to threaten the world government, the 5 old stars have decided not to compromise, and the new world's franchised countries you can kill if you want, we don't lack those. Anyway, as long as we kill Moria, who can't move, Moria himself is causing trouble, and the pressure from other participating countries will not be able to completely affect us. You have the guts, Orgrim, to kill all the more than 170 participating countries. But this is obviously impossible. Of course, the world government also has its limit. Wulaoxing believes that once the situation reaches the number of 3 countries, the navy will not wait for Orgrim to come, and directly kill Eniru to take revenge on Orgrim. Reem. But at this time, the end is already over, and there is a serious feud between the world government and Orgrim. But think about it carefully, is there still little hatred between them? What happens next depends on whether Orgrim will go crazy and start a war, or if the navy has some plans. What if it's a celestial dragon? Jun suddenly asked. What if Orgrim captures the Draco and threatens our navy? Jun asked again. This is not something that our navy can make a decision on, but as long as there is no evidence, I heard Wulaoxing seem to be willing to withstand some pressure, but the possibility is not very high. After all, Wulaoxing has restricted Tianlong. Before this matter comes to an end, even the Chambord Islands are not allowed to go out. It is not that simple for Orgrim to capture the Draco, the Warring States General said. Orgrim is taking action against the franchising countries, and the navy can also get involved. If the Tianlong people are involved, it is not something their navy can handle. It will depend on how the 5 old stars arrange it. However, although Wulaoxing did not say anything directly, Warring States felt that Wulaoxing's attitude on this matter was very subtle. Okay, let's not discuss these issues. Have you found any information on Orgrim's whereabouts? Warring States asked. The CP agency gave what they called reliable information, saying that Orgrim was heading to the Devil's Triangle, but his specific whereabouts were unknown, Consultant Ahe said again. What happened to the rest of the Warhammer pirates? Are they out in force? The Warring States General asked again. According to Avalon's eyeliner report, it seems that most of them have been dispatched, and Avalon is very weak now. Consultant Ahe nodded and said. Warring States had a smile on his lips and said, isn't this an opportunity? Are there no movements among the pirates in the New World? The Big Mom pirates had some unusual changes before. We originally suspected that Charlotte Lingling might have discovered something in advance, and her actions seemed to be making arrangements for the Warhammer pirates, Consultant Ahe said softly. The Warring States General's face lit up and he said, then are they taking action now? Once they take action, no matter what the result is on our side, whether it is a life and death battle or the death of Orgrim, they will be able to deal a huge blow to the Warhammer pirates, which is a very good thing for us. General Staff Ahe looked at Sengoku's excited expression, shook his head a little helplessly and said, although you want to use the power of pirates to deal with Orgrim, Orgrim is not a fool, Sengoku. According to the latest intelligence information, the Beast Pirates intend to launch a war against the Big Mom Pirates. Some cotters from both sides have already had 2 conflicts. Warring States was stunned for a moment when he heard this. His expression was a little disappointed, but he quickly sighed and said, Orgrim and Kaido have finally reached some cooperation. If we had made this arrangement earlier, maybe the situation will look better. There is no doubt that Orgrim must also understand that if there is any action on his side, some unscrupulous people may come to steal his home. So he also made some preparations, otherwise Kaido has not done anything for several years, and suddenly at this time, there was friction with the Big Mom pirates? How could it be such a coincidence? Although Sengoku also understood that there was a high probability that Kaido would not really start a war with Charlotte Lingling, but the problem was, Charlotte Te Lingling dares to bet on this possibility. Is it going to be a family swap trick? Charlotte Lingling seizes Avalon, and Kaido moves into Cake Island. Soon, he swept away these thoughts in his mind, and Sengoku said in short, ask people to keep a close eye on Fishman Island and the New World Portal Sea area to see if the whereabouts of the Warhammer pirates can be found. How many people they dispatched this time and the size of the fleet require some preparation. Intelligence will do. General Staff Ahe nodded, and then said, but I guess there shouldn't be many. After all, their roots are in the New World, and our Navy's control over the first half of the Great Route is still very strong. The Devil's Triangle, the sea area, is not very far from the three fortresses of Justice, and the surrounding radiation power is very sufficient. If he brings too many people, it will be difficult to cover up his whereabouts, and on the other hand, their supplies will also be a problem. Warring States nodded in approval, and then said our Navy must also be prepared. This time we will mobilize 50,000 elite naval officers to participate in the war. 50 warships will ambush into the thick fog of the Devil's Triangle. Once Og, Reem appears and immediately seals off the sea area. Garp, and you all have to go to the front line. The first goal is to directly capture and execute Orgrim. Speaking of this, Warring States looked at Zifa again and said, Zifa, I will leave this headquarters to you. Isn't there still a marshal here? Zifa laughed and joked. He also knew that Warring States was trying to save face for him. After all, he is now missing a hand and retired, so he is not suitable to participate and may become a drag. That's why Warring States he used the words I'll leave this headquarters to you to give Zifa a step up. At this time, Jun asked curiously how to determine Orgrim's identity. After all, he has a subordinate who seems to be very good at pretending. The CP agency said they have a solution. Warring States raised his eyebrows and said, do we believe what they say? Who is responsible if something goes wrong? Jun frowned and said. Sengoku's expression was also a little strange, and he said they seem to be very confident, and there will be absolutely no mistakes in what they say. If there is a problem, they must be responsible. But as far as I know, it seems that CP-0 has planted a very powerful spy next to Orgrim. There was a lot of information about O'Hara before, and it was this powerful spy who got it. I think, surely nothing will go wrong, right? That's it, Jun nodded when he heard this. That was indeed very feasible. A sledgehammer breaks into pirates. Author, Zippo. Chapter 318. In a certain sea area of the New World, a huge warship is sailing in the deep sea. This ship is Orgrim's flagship, the deep sea overlord, the Black Narwhal. At this time, Stussy was talking to Orgrim in the cabin of the ship. Ha 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 ha, Orgrim laughed loudly and said. No, it's G ha 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 ha. Your laughter lacks some arrogance. You need to be more arrogant. Stussy said to Orgrim. The face of Orgrim stiffened slightly, then he took a deep breath and laughed. Gee ha 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 ha, Warring States period, it is indeed you. Is this bastard up to something? Stussy touched his chin and glanced at this Orgrim, then thought for a moment and said, it looks a bit more similar this time, but, something still feels wrong. I feel that it is enough. My ability is to transform the other person's voice, temperament and body shape, Orgrim said. In fact, this is not the real Orgrim, but Katarina Depen. As soon as he returned to Avalon, Depen felt that he had walked into a den of thieves, because Orgrim asked her to play himself and go to the Devil's Triangle to fight Moria. What the hell, although I, Depen, was on the front line before and have not come back, so I don't understand some of the situation, but no matter what, I know that this matter is not that simple. How could it be possible that it was just Mariah who was causing trouble? Sure enough, Orgrim then told Depen that behind this, the world government and the Navy were planning a trap. When she goes, she is likely to face the main force of the world government and the various high-level combat forces of the Navy. In Depen's heart, 10,000 alpacas are running wildly. Doesn't this mean I'm looking for death? Fortunately, this mission can be surrendered. She only needs to wait until the Navy headquarters shows up and Sengoku and others show up. When the time comes, the surveillance phone bug will record the scene, and it will be considered as evidence, and on the other side, Orgrim and the others will launch a surprise attack. Yes, the voice, appearance, and temperament are all very similar, with almost no flaws, but the soul is still different. Orgrim is more arrogant, and, he has a very tough mouth, and even if he is at a disadvantage, he will not show any cowardice. In short, the more arrogant you are, the easier it will be. If you really see Sengoku, you can just open your mouth and scold him. Stussy said with a smile. Dai Peng had a slight toothache, so I scolded the admiral directly. If I scolded him too harshly, and when the fight started and my identity was exposed, would I still have a chance to surrender? Both of them. After another exchange of acting skills, Dai Peng felt that he was getting closer to Orgrim. Although Stussy did not have the ability to change, her many years of experience as an agent were still very powerful. Dai Peng touched the pendulum doom hammer, who was beside him, said with some emotion, "Boss, Orgrim has really spent a lot of money. This warhammer has been handed over to me, what if it is seized by the Navy? If the plan goes well, we won't have any problems, let alone a warhammer. If the plan fails, we will all die, so why not give up a warhammer?" Stussy murmured softly. As she finished speaking, the doom hammer emitted a scorching breath. It was obvious that this was Orgrim's warhammer. It was a real thing, not a fake. You are a user with the Phantom Beast Fruit ability, and you are very powerful. As long as you don't use any random abilities, it is very convenient to imitate Orgrim. When the time comes, if the Navy does not come out immediately, you and Emma, when Leah fights, try not to use your abilities. Just pretend to be Orgrim and use this warhammer directly. Stussy told Dai Peng these words again. Dai Peng nodded. If she didn't use abilities or anything, and held such an obvious warhammer, it would be really easy for her to imitate Orgrim. Before she could speak, Stussy took out 2 more small shells from her handbag and said, "These are the volley shells from Sky Island. They can release a lot of impact energy. When you need to act, you can use them secretly." This baby. It has to be said that Stussy is quite well prepared. As long as Dai Peng performs normally, there is almost no possibility of being exposed. Dai Peng looked at Stussy with a somewhat complicated look, thinking that you have so many tricks and are very thoughtful. What went wrong, so that Boss Orgrim discovered your true identity at a glance? At this moment, Stussy suddenly took out her lipstick from her handbag. Dai Peng was a little surprised. "What are you doing with your lipstick at this time?" But soon, Dai Peng discovered that Stussy's lipstick was vibrating slightly. If he hadn't looked carefully, he wouldn't have noticed anything at all. "It's a contact from the CP agency, so don't speak yet." Stussy glanced at Dai Peng and said. Dai Peng nodded with a curious expression. This was the first time she had seen such a thing. Then she saw Stussy's fingers lightly licking the lipstick, and then, the base popped out, and a small black phone bug was shaking. "I'm Stussy." Stussy answered the phone and answered softly. A male-female voice came from the other end of the phone. He did not ask Stussy whether it was suitable to communicate information. After all, as long as Stussy can accepting this contact means that the environment she is in is safe and communicable. Otherwise, Stussy is stupid and would accept this information? Unless she rebels. But how is that possible? You think so? Ha ha ha. Great job, Stussy, how's it going? Can the whereabouts of the Warhammer pirates be determined? The person on the other side of the phone asked. Everything is going well. I am on the Black Narwhal, the flagship of the Warhammer pirates, the deep sea overlord. Orgrim is also on this ship. They are heading to the Devil's Triangle. However, since they are sneaking in the deep sea, so I can't judge the current location, but now, we have not passed through the Fishman Island, nor have we chosen to leap from the Red Earth continent, so our current location should still be in the New World. Stussy responded softly. Yeah? You must pay attention to safety and be sure not to be exposed, lest it affect our plans, the phone bug said again. A sneer hung on Stussy's face, but her tone was very calm and she responded, understood. Let me confirm for you for the last time, Hosgarot Orgrim is on board the Black Narwhal, the flagship of the Warhammer pirates, the overlord of the deep, right? As soon as this ship appears, we can notify the Navy to take action. No problem, the phone bug asked again. That's right, no problem, Stussy said. So that's it, if there is any new situation, find a way to contact us as soon as possible. Once this mission is completed, you will be credited with a great contribution, and you may be able to come into contact with the 5 old stars and join the real strongest shield inside. The guy over at the phone bug gave Stussy a pie path. CP-0 is called the strongest shield, but in fact, they have a special team within them that is the real strongest shield, and most of the members have no chance to join it. If it were in the past, Stussy would be very interested in this matter. Contact Wulaoxing and join CP-0's strongest shield. This means that she is likely to be directly responsible for Wulaoxing in the future, or responsible for some celestial dragons. In this way, in line with her status as the Queen of Happy Street, she is much less restrictive, has much fewer external threats, and has no messy bosses. As long as she does not commit suicide, offend the 5 old stars or the Tianlong people, etc., she will not fall due to various internal strife. But now, Stussy has no interest in it at all. However, although there was a look of lack of interest on his face, Stussy's tone seemed slightly excited, and she said to the phone bug, I know. Dai Peng looked on in shock. Is this acting? Love it, love it. It seems that there is still a lot of room for improvement in my abilities. After hanging up this special phone bug, Stussy pouted and said, maybe if you are caught, you can surrender and still live. If I am caught, I will definitely die without a burial place. That's why Boss Orgrim arranged for you to evacuate as soon as the Navy appeared. As long as you don't reveal that you are one of ours at the first time, with your identity, there should be no problem, right? Dai Peng smiled and said. It should be fine. Stussy nodded. Then, she was silent for a while and said, I don't know how Orgrim and the others are doing. This operation, Worth Pirate Group, was divided into 3 batches. Stussy and Dai Peng were the first batch. They entered the Devil's Triangle first, contacted Moria, and fished out the Navy. Beckman and the rest of the cotters are some distance behind their ship. If the Black Narwhal alone cannot get the Navy to take the bait, they will serve as the second batch of bait and bring the large fleet in again. If the Navy takes action immediately after seeing Orgrim, Beckman and others will act as a response force and make corresponding changes depending on the situation. In short, they will entangle the Navy and buy some time for Orgrim. Orgrim was currently leading Sphinx and Neiman in another sea area. Melview, in the huge palace, Shiji is sitting on his throne, listening to Indigo's report with a slightly complicated expression. In other words, that bastard Orgrim has already started taking action? Shiji asked. Yes, Admiral Brother Indigo nodded. Shiji sighed slightly and said that guy is really brave. He really didn't come to me to discuss it, or ask me for help or something. Of course Shiji also knew about Enelu. He waited around in Melview, feeling that Orgrim might come to him for help with such a big matter. And Shiji was also very interested in helping. The result was good, and the result was that they had already started taking action. That bastard Orgrim had no intention of coming to him at all. Soon, Shiji smiled again and said, but this is what he looks like, you would rather risk having all your bones broken than come to me for help. You are proud enough. After a short pause, Shiji moved his body, looked at Indigo and said, but after all, I am also his leader. If someone bullies him like this, How can I not do anything at all? Oh, since Grim doesn't want me to participate in these previous things, then I'll go to Avalon for a walk. Shiki also knew that Orgrim asked Kaido to cause trouble for the Big Mom pirates. The group exerts pressure. But on the sea, it's not just the Big Mom pirates who covet Avalon. Now that Avalon's power is empty, who knows if some madman will suddenly attack there. Even if Avalon cannot be captured, Orgrim's losses will be considerable if Avalon is destroyed. But if he, Shiji, puts on a show of force and goes to live in Avalon for a while, with his name, he can completely intimidate those young people. Even without Kaido, Charlotte Lingling would probably not dare to act rashly again. After hearing what Shiji said, Brother Indigo also had a smile on his lips and said, "Sure enough, Admiral, you are still worried about Mr. Hammer. Humph, I still hope that this bastard will support me in my old age in the future. How can I do that if he dies suddenly?" Shiji snorted arrogantly. At the same time, on a flamingo pirate ship in a certain sea area of the New World, Doflamingo was also giving instructions to the people on the phone bug. "Diamandi, you must be careful not to receive any special treatment. They will accept whatever arrangements are made by the slaves. Don't even look at them twice. Do you understand?" Doflamingo ordered on the phone bug's side. "Yes, young master, I will just do it as I have done in the past. There will be no surprises." Diamandi responded on the other side of the phone. Doflamingo nodded. This kind of thing has indeed been done many times, and there has never been an accident. This time, it was just among slaves. There are just 3 more guests. After hanging up the phone, Doflamingo whispered softly, "Master Hammer, you are really brave, Marijoya, Furofura. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment." A sledgehammer breaks into pirates. Author, Zippo. Chapter 319. Near the sea near Marijoya, there were many captured slaves held in the cabin of a ship without any flags. And this ship is Doflamingo's slave business transport ship. Doflamingo has been in the slave business for several years, and the biggest buyer in his business is Marijoya. This is not to say that all the celestial dragons are buying. In fact, Marijoya has a huge demand for slaves. For example, many of their facilities may seem advanced, but in fact, they all rely on the manpower of slaves to operate, such as that moving walk or something. So every once in a while, Marijoya would secretly purchase a large number of slaves to add to these teams to maintain Marijoya's appearance. As for Doflamingo, because he had somewhat shady connections in the world government, he quickly became one of Marijoya's slave suppliers after he got involved in this business. Therefore, his Don Quixote family has done this kind of transportation of slaves to Marijoya many times, and there has never been an accident. But this time, among the miserable slaves on this ship, there were 3 guys hidden, namely Orgrim, Neiman, and Sphinx. Orgrim was locked up in a messy and dirty cabin at this time. It was a coincidence that every 3 people were detained in a cabin prison. This could effectively prevent slaves from rioting, even if something unexpected happens to the slaves in the prison, it will not spread quickly to all the slaves, making it easier to suppress it. Orgrim was wearing a pair of tattered shorts, with several bloody marks from whipping on his body. His face was cut by a knife blade, and the flesh and blood were turned out, forming horrific dark red wounds. His true colors cannot be seen at all. Of course, if he hadn't been suppressing his self-healing power, this kind of injury would have returned to normal long ago. His hands were shackled by thick and hard iron chains, and his overall appearance was like that of a powerful strong man who was caught by a slave trader and, after some torture, was ready to be sold to Marijoya. In fact, slaves with an image like him are very popular in Marijoya. After all, slaves like him are very powerful, and one person may be able to stand up to several people. Sitting next to Orgrim were two guys, Niemann and Sphinx. Niemann wore an iron mask on her face, covering her entire head. With her figure, no one would suspect that she was a woman after her head was covered. He is a muscular man, even stronger than Orgrim. Even though the chest muscles under his shirt are a little exaggerated, they are not particularly obtrusive. As for the Sphinx, her hair was disheveled, her twin tails were no longer tied up, and her face was so dark that it was impossible to tell her true identity. Dinner time. You scum! Several young men from the Don Quixote family walked into the smelly and dirty cabin. They all had looks of disgust on their faces, carrying a rice pail in their hands. Every time they came to a prison, he would throw down 3 bowls, and then randomly scoop out some very unappetizing looking chaff from the rice bucket, which would be considered as a meal for these slaves. Soon, these younger brothers of the Don Quixote family arrived. In front of Orgrim's cage, it was obvious that they didn't know the identities of Orgrim and the others. They threw down 3 dirty bowls in disgust, and then made some disgusting soup from the rice bucket. Juicy bran vegetables. After the tossing, they walked to the next cage. They didn't give Orgrim any preferential treatment at all. Orgrim walked over without saying a word, picked up 2 bowls, and handed them to He picked up the Sphinx and Niemann behind him. Then, after picking up the last bowl, he sat back down. The Sphinx looked at the bowl of pig food in his hand with a very tangled expression, and closed his eyes for the last time. She lowered her head suddenly and started eating. Niemann looked very experienced and started eating with the Sphinx. After all, she had encountered these things before, and even then, her treatment was even worse than now. With Niemann compared with the Sphinx, Orgrim ate very calmly, as if he was still savoring the sourness in it. While drinking the pig food like soup, Orgrim was also thinking about what to expect. What should be done after arriving at Mariejoy? As soon as he receives contact from Stussy, he will immediately take action in Mariejoy. Calculating this incident carefully, there are only 2 ways to break the situation. The first, it means fighting a head-on war with the elite force of the Navy in the trap they set. But this is obviously not advisable. Even in an encounter, the Warhammer pirates do not have the power to confront the main force of the Navy's elite head-on, let alone is it in a trap specially laid out by the Navy. If it were in the New World, it would be better. After all, the Navy's control there is not very strong, but this time it is in the first half of the Grand Route, so there is no need to mention what's inside. It's dangerous. If you are really stubborn and go head-to-head with the Navy, even if you can win, the losses will be heavy. If you finally catch up with the Big Mom pirates and other veteran pirates, your background will probably be consumed a lot. Even if it is, winning by luck is not much different from losing. Of course, if you want to say there are benefits, there are benefits. For example, your reputation will definitely increase, your power will be stronger, and it will be easier to recruit troops in the New World. But compared with this, for example, the Warhammer Pirates' original development plan and established plans will all be shattered. It is even very likely that people like Big Mom will seize the opportunity and usher in successive high-intensity wars, and they will continue to be bloodlet. If you want to be like now, it is very difficult to develop steadily like this. The second method is to seize the evidence that the Navy and the world government are involved. With this evidence, Orgrim and the others can find a way to give the world government apply pressure to force their plan to abort, prevent this war from starting, and threaten them to release Enel. But there must be a degree of restraint. The first purpose is to rescue Enel, not to tell the world the government fights to the death, and in the end both sides lose, and everything is destroyed. At the beginning, Orgrim's idea was to wait for the Navy to actually enter the scene. After Stussy seized the evidence, he would immediately massacre the participating countries and threaten the world government to make compromises or something. But then I thought about it carefully, and I think the world government will not make concessions in this regard. Once they open this hole, if they threaten the participating countries whenever something happens to the pirates in the future, won't the world government be in trouble? What's the point of the Navy's existence? They must show a tough stance on this matter. Even if you slaughter several participating countries, we will not compromise with pirates or evil. Then the biggest possibility is that after Orgrim has slaughtered one or two franchised countries, Enel's head will also hang on Mary Joa. Then, Orgrim thought of the Draco. If a few Draco were captured, the deterrent effect might be more substantial than that of the participating countries. But I'm afraid that the 5 old stars are stubborn. If they really dare to sacrifice the lives of the celestial dragons to the flag, they will get the support of a large wave of alliance countries. Look, in order to not compromise with the pirates, our world government, even the lives of the celestial dragons can be sacrificed. Why don't you hurry up and give more of this year's celestial gold? As for whether the 5 old stars would grit their teeth and sacrifice a few Dracos or something, Orgrim couldn't guarantee it. However, there is still a high possibility that the final result will be that several celestial dragons will die and Enel's head will be hung on Mary Joa. On the surface, it seems that Orgrim is not at a loss, but if you think about it carefully, he is simply at a huge loss. Without an arrow, he has really lost a future general. On the world government side, the death of a few Tianlong people is equivalent to the death of a few pig teammates who were holding back. In essence, not only is there no despite the losses, I also gained a wave of benefits. Can Orgrim do such a thing? Therefore, Orgrim finally felt that although this idea was correct, it needed something that could threaten the world government and prevent them from being defeated. This bargaining chip must be of sufficient importance to the world government and be able to restrain the 5 old stars. In other words, this bargaining chip must be more important than ordinary Tianlong people. It must be so important that even the 5 old stars have to treat it with caution. If you don't dare to fight to the death, you must succumb to Orgrim's power. After thinking about it, Orgrim found that there was indeed something that was very suitable for this bargaining chip. That is Lord Im's throne, which symbolizes the highest core concept of the world government and represents the throne of the void, which is non-dictatorship, where all countries are equal, and no one can override it. Of course, it has been said that this is the throne of Lord Im, so the beautiful concepts of non-dictatorship and equality of all countries are all nonsense used by the world government. But although this thing is nonsense, you have to say that its meaning is indeed very important. On the one hand, it is an inheritance from 20 kings 800 years ago. It can be regarded as a holy relic. To the world government, extraordinary, it is undoubtedly their most precious treasure. Whenever a new country joins the world government, or a new king comes to power in the country, they will be brought to Mary Joa to observe the symbol of equality. The void throne, and swearing an oath in front of this throne, one can imagine how important this represents. It is far from being comparable to ordinary celestial dragons. After all, there are many celestial dragons, and a few deaths are nothing. Even the 5 old stars may be happy secretly, but there is only one void throne. On the other hand, this is Lord Im's throne. If Orgrim snatches this away, the 5 old stars who seem to be superior on the surface will be furious. Because in front of Master Yumuo, the 5 old stars have almost no status at all. Any talk of the highest power or the highest position of Tianlong is all nonsense. It can even be said that they are the 5 spokesmen launched by Lord Im to help Lord Im run the world government. To put it more harshly, they are just Lord Im's 5 dogs. After all, as the highest ranking Tianlong, he has to kneel down directly when he sees Lord Im. One can imagine the status gap in this. The master's throne was snatched away by Orgrim. This is not something that can be solved by just killing a few Dracos. The 5 old stars didn't feel bad at all for the death of a few good-for-nothing Tianlongs. With Lord Naim's aloof attitude behind the scenes, he probably wouldn't care about these rubbish either. But if their master's throne is robbed by pirates, the sacred relics of the 20 kings 800 years ago, and the throne of equality that symbolizes the core concept of the world government are robbed, the 5 old stars will really be in trouble. Ah! This is not a matter of death and destruction. Okay, you world government bullshit, kill Enelu and see? As long as you dare to kill Enel, I, Orgrim, will turn the throne of the void into a tourist attraction in Avalon. No tickets will be charged, and hundreds of slaves, beggars, and the like will sit there every day. Take photos and put them in the newspapers to show off in turn to see if you want to be shameless. Or invite Whitebeard, Kaido, Charlotte Lingling, and Boss Shiji to take a group photo in front of the Void Throne, or even take turns to sit and experience the feeling of the king of the world. Maybe this will become an opportunity to promote the friendly development of pirate relations. If your world government is really so bullish and tough, and dares to kill Enelu and fight me to the death, then I, Orgrim, will admit defeat and give you a letter of acceptance. That's right, Orgrim pretended to be a slave and infiltrated Marijoya this time, not to cause a massacre in Marijoya or kill the Draco. Instead, he went with the idea of snatching away the Void Throne. As long as this treasure is obtained, the world government will most likely give in. However, in Marijoa's operation, the danger must be calculated, and Orgrim still arranged some backup. A sledgehammer breaks into pirates. Author, Zippo. Chapter 320. In the grey underground of Marijoya, in the huge slave factory, Orgrim is driving a gear. There were no accidents along the way. The 3 of them were acquired step by step by the slave merchants of Marijoya, and then were placed in the flesh and blood factory on the underground moving walkway, where they began to work hard. The gears here fit in with each other, and with the push of countless slaves, they are constantly rotating, maintaining Marijoa's bright appearance. Boss, how many days are we going to work here? We promised to come to Marijo and cause a scene. I'm very irritable. The Sphinx followed Orgrim and asked through gritted teeth while pushing the gear. The Sphinx's temper was not very patient to begin with and was very irritable. He acted like a slave here and pushed the gear every day. The more I push, the more irritated I become. What's the rush? Just think of it as experiencing life, and you won't have to push it away if you want to in the future. Orgrim curled his lips and said very casually. After Depeng and Stussy get it done, we can take action. Neiman smiled and whispered. Before coming, Orgrim thought that the slaves here in Marijoa would be strictly controlled. But in fact, the management here is not that strict. They whispered here the communication will not attract any attention. Although there will be supervisors walking back and forth here from time to time, their strength is about that. It may be because most of the slaves acquired here have been trained, and many of them have been trained. People have long been numb, and there is no resistance at all. Secondly, Marijoa has not had any problems with slaves for hundreds of years. This long-term stable state has caused everyone's vigilance to decrease. Even exhausted. This is also a normal thing. While chatting casually with Neiman and Sphinx, Orgrim's eyes were focused on another huge gear more than 100 meters away. Among the slaves, Marijoa's slave races are very complex. Here, Orgrim can see the giant race, the long-hand race, the long-legged race, and naturally the Murloc race. At this time, under the huge gear, there was a red-skinned strong fishman with various whip marks on his body, and he was pushing the gear without saying a word. Not long after, an overseer walked by. It was obvious that the strong fishman made no mistake, but that the overseer still gave him a hard whip. It seemed as if he was doing this on purpose. Normally, slaves who were whipped would wail in pain and beg for mercy. But the strong man from the Fishman tribe said nothing. Without blinking an eyelid, and without any movement, just silently pushing the gear. Maybe it is precisely because of his silence that he has a disobedient heart, so he is often taken care of by the supervisor here, right? Interesting. Orgrim's lips curled up slightly and he murmured softly. Yes, he had already recognized who the strong fishman was. This man was the pioneer who would burn Marijoya and set off the slave liberation movement in the future. the great adventurer of Fishman Island, Fisher Tiger. This man is also the leader of the gangster organization of Fishman Street, and the eldest brother of Jinbei and Aaron. Orgrim did not expect to meet him here. Because it is now the end of the year 1503 in the Hellenic calendar, and there is still less than half a month before 1504. The incident of burning Marijoa in Orgrim's impression broke out in the year 1508 in the Hellenic calendar. This incident in the film, Fisher Tiger liberated the slaves on Marijoa regardless of race, and rescued several big figures among them. For example, the second sister-in-law of the Revolutionary Army, Clara and Boa Hancock from the Shichibukai. The three sisters are another example of the richest man, Tizalo, who built the Golden City Gulen Tizalo. If you want to say whether he is interested in this, Orgrim is still somewhat interested. After all, there is not to mention anything else, there is a seed of the most beautiful woman in the world in the future. Orgrim also thought about whether he could meet him if he came here as a slave. But in fact, he didn't. The three Hancock sisters are now simply he didn't appear in Marijoa, so he probably wasn't caught by the slave traders. He didn't see Kral or Tizalo at all, so he probably didn't become a slave. Only Fisher Tiger was considered a slave. The guy is familiar and impressive. And Orgrim is surprised. Has this guy come to be a slave so early? Judging from his appearance now, he should have been here for a while, but even so, from now on counting it all, he had been a slave in Marijoa for at least 4 years before he found an opportunity to escape from the Sea of Misery and return to Fishman Island. Then he planned the burning of Marijoa on Fishman Island, the slave liberation movement, and climbed with bare hands. Going to the Red Earth continent brought great shame to Marijoa. What an unlucky guy, Orgrim murmured softly. He rarely has admiration for people who are weaker than him. The original Dr. Clover of O'Hara, before he died, was considered one. This Fisher Tiger, too, it's one. A repetitive, boring, and gloomy day passed like this. The work here is done in 2 shifts, each shift works for 12 hours, and then slaves will take over the work here. Then, during the 12 hours of rest, you have to eat, drink, and defecate. After all, when you start working, you won't be able to stop for a minute. So it doesn't seem very intense, but in fact, there are many slaves every day. He was exhausted to death in this environment. In the prison, Orgrim was holding a rice bowl in his hand, which was filled with food that looked unappetizing. He carried the rice bowl and walked to the corner of the prison. Separated by the iron fence, and in the cage next to it, Fisher Tiger and his 2 roommates were imprisoned. However, the 2 roommates had already devoured their food and were sitting resting on the ground. On the contrary, Fisher Tiger, like Orgrim, slowly tasted this disgusting thing, as if he could experience life from it. Orgrim took 2 bites, and then looking at Fisher Tiger, as if aware of this gaze, Fisher Tiger also turned to look at Orgrim. Orgrim's hideous face was scarred and his face was invisible. A smile appeared on his face, and then, the aura on his body flashed away. Before Fisher Tiger could react, the 2 roommates in his cage seemed to be shocked by some invisible force, passed out directly, and collapsed on the dark floor. However, this kind of movement did not attract anyone's attention at all. Going to bed after eating and seizing the time to rest is so common here. Overlord Color, Tiger glanced at Orgrim in surprise, and said softly, "Gee ha 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 ha, I have some discernment." Orgrim smiled evilly. Tiger glanced down at the shackles on Orgrim's wrists again, and asked softly, "You can use Overlord's domineering energy, and what you wear are not sea tower stone shackles. So with your strength, you shouldn't be a slave here, right? Come and experience life wherever you are interested." Orgrim smiled and said. Fisher Tiger gave Orgrim a strange look, and then discovered that the other 2 guys in this guy's prison didn't seem to be simple either. "Boss, why do you have the time to chat with others?" the Sphinx asked Orgrim while eating his food curiously. Being idle is also idle, right? Orgrim curled his lips and said. Then, ignoring the Sphinx, Orgrim looked at Fisher Tiger and asked, how many years have you been here? Fisher Tiger was silent for a moment, but he did not refuse to answer. Said softly, it's been a year. Are you familiar with the situation here? Orgrim asked again. Tiger looked a little confused, then nodded, and said it's not bad. He has never given up on resisting until now, and has always wanted to find an opportunity to escape from here. Therefore, in the past year, he has also observed and studied many details, changing in various slave jobs, and he is indeed very familiar with this place. Familiar. You are different from the other guys. There is no numbness and despair in your eyes. Are you looking for a chance to escape? Orgrim asked with an evil smile. Tiger looked at Orgrim and felt that this guy looked familiar, but he couldn't remember where he had seen it before. Logically speaking, in this environment, no, you should talk nonsense to such people, let alone tell these people your thoughts. But Tiger always feels that he really has a chance this time. If he misses it, he doesn't know how long he will have to wait. So in silence, with after taking the exam for a while, Tiger said while eating his meal, yes, Your Excellency also wants to escape? Can we help each other? Orgrim was stunned for a moment, then smiled and waved his hand. Do you know how much hardship I endured in order to get in here? How could I just escape so easily? Tiger is really confused this time. Everyone else was arrested. It seems like you three came in on purpose. But soon, his heart became hot. Just because these three people came in on purpose, they were more likely to bring chaos, and chaos was the opportunity to escape that Tiger himself had been waiting for. It's not that difficult to leave here. You do something for me and I'll take you away, Fisher Tiger, Orgrim said softly. Tiger's expression was shocked. He looked at Orgrim in surprise, and whispered, do you know me? Of course I recognize the great adventurer of Fishman Island. I have a very good relationship with Fishman Island. Your Majesty Neptune even drank with me, Orgrim smiled evilly. Fisher Tiger's expression changed again, and then he looked at Orgrim's ferocious face seriously. Had a drink with King Neptune, this thing is rare, because King Neptune himself has some prejudices against humans. In recent years, except for Whitebeard, it seems that there are only. Thinking of this, Fisher Tiger's expression suddenly changed. He once again observed the man in front of him, and then he felt a little. He whispered incredulously, it's you, Kajgro. Okay, just know who I am. Orgrim waved his hand. After knowing Orgrim's identity, Tiger not only did not feel fear, but was extremely excited. This is a real boss. I didn't expect that he could be in Marijoya. I saw him in the slave factory. No one would believe it if I told him. And this boss has a very good relationship with Fishman Island. He is a trustworthy person. Before he was captured here, Taiji also knew that Avalon had cooperated closely with Fishman Island, and the chaotic situation in Fishman Street had gradually been improved. He had thought about going to Avalon to see those compatriots before. How are we living there? It's just that before we had time, Mary Joan was captured as a slave. With this boss here, is escape from prison still a thing? Don't know what you want to do? Tiger asked in a deep voice. Orgrim sat cross-legged on the ground and ate all the pig food in his rice bowl in one go. Then he threw it aside and stretched out his fingers to make signs on the ground. Soon, he drew a rough map with his finger on the ground. It was Marijoa, and it was also the accurate information Doflamingo provided him. In Marijoya's Pongal Castle, where the Throne of the Void is located, how can you get past it from here? I only have the map on the ground, not the map underground. If I couldn't reach you, I would have planned to attack from the ground. Now that I have met you, maybe it would be good to change my posture. Orgrim smiled evilly and said. The underground factory has no route into Pongal Castle, and there is no space under the entire Pongal Castle. Tiger said quickly. Before Orgrim could speak, Tiger continued, but the extension of the moving walk is right in front of the main entrance of Pongal Castle. After finishing speaking, Tiger looked at Orgrim and said, I know this road, but I'm curious, why do you want to go to Pangal Castle? Ah! Orgrim murmured first, then smiled and said nothing, I want to sit on the Void Throne. Tiger. What's the reason?